So don't be afraid to participate.
Yeah, this is a highly participatory event here. So I hope you all are going to be okay with that. I'm excited. This is the first time I've offered a workshop like this. So you will have to bear with me a little bit, and we'll see how it goes. So thank you all for volunteering to explore this idea with me. Get started. So this is a session where we're really just sort of an experimental way of talking about your research and just trying to shorten it, simplify it, simplify it. Just one of the reasons that we have this session is that there is the 3-minute theses competition coming up, which if Joe wants to talk about that at the top or the end of the session to kind of give a little context for why we're doing this sort of strange, sort of make things shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah, sure. So every year we usually try to do at the Grad Center some kind of competition where it gives grad students a chance to, showcase their research to a broad general audience. This year we're doing the 3-minute thesis version, which was started in Australia, and now other universities have adopted it. But you basically have 3 minutes and 1 slide to explain your research to a general audience, and then you get judged by people, and then you can win stuff. So the way it's set up right now, we'll have first, second, and third place winners and an audience choice winner, and all those people will win some money. And anyone who submits a video of their presentation will get some swag from GAPSA. A Moleskine notebook and a water bottle is what is on deck right now. So it's going to be virtual this year. Usually it would be in person, and it would be like a live event, and it would be in an auditorium somewhere. But this year it's going to be virtual, so we'd be putting all of the videos up on our website where people can watch them and vote on them. And it should be fun. So yeah, that's really one of the main reasons that we're hosting this thing, is to try to get you to think about how you could quickly and clearly explain your research to anybody you meet. So yeah, that's it. I'll let Margaret, because she's the expert at this, get going.
Yeah, so that is sort of this will help you if you want to enter the 3-minute thesis competition, but it also is useful, just I think we're all used to trying to explain what our research is to people who don't study what we study, our family, our friends, other, even other grad students or other people in our departments or conference goers. And it's just tough sometimes to condense what you're talking about in a way that still conveys what you do somewhat accurately, and also doesn't bore your audience or make them tune out to what you're talking about. So that's the other skill that we're trying to bring with this sort of idea of simplifying your message and making it shorter. So the first part of making a simple message is just making a message to begin with. So we had another session, and the recording will be available, about an elevator pitch, which is kind of a lot of the same ideas that we'll be talking about today. Where one of the things you want to do at the beginning is just think about the core components of your research. What's the problem you're trying to solve, or the question you're investigating? What are possible solutions, or what hypotheses do you have about that question or problem? Why it matters to the people you're talking to. So this is an important thing to think about, is who your audience is when you're doing this. Today we're just each other, so we get to play around with that idea. But it's different if you're talking to your family or your friends, or talking to other people in the field, or talking to somebody who you would want to hire you, all of these things. So you want to think about who your audience is and why they might care about your work. Pardon me. And then also what benefits will result. So this ties into why it matters to your audience, but it can be sort of a broader thing too, of why it matters to do this. what are the risks if no one does this? Like, what is the cost of not doing this research versus what the benefits are of doing it? So those are sort of your 4 key components to understanding or to crafting your message. And this is just a really simple formula to sort of start kind of putting all those pieces into place when you're putting together your short message about your thing. And this creates a 1-sentence description of your research, but you can sort of expand on it if it doesn't quite give enough information, or you can try to keep it to this to keep it as short as possible. So this formula is simply, I'm studying blank to find out blank in order to blank. So I guess I didn't really introduce myself. I'm Margaret, and I work in the libraries here, but I also am a graduate student at Hamline University. And at Hamline, I'm studying how environmental education organizations responded to the COVID pandemic to find out what adaptations and different programming methods were successful for them in order to help them expand in the future their different sort of learning opportunities, and to find out what kinds of virtual and asynchronous activities are successful in engaging folks with nature, which is already pretty long-winded for just that short thing. But so even having this short formula still creates a lot of words and a pretty long description of what you're talking about. But we'll be playing around to try to shorten it. So some ways that you can simplify your message is to use the active voice. So if you're not familiar with the active and passive voice differences, you might say something like, the patients were observed, 4 times a week by the nursing staff. So that's a passive voice sentence, but it's actually a little shorter to say the nursing staff observed the patients 4 times a week. Like, that's a shorter statement. It gets to the point quicker. It's easier for your audience to understand, like, oh, it was the nurses who did the action of observing people this many times. You should shorten your sentences. So even though that formula is really nice, it does create a very long sentence sometimes. And while we kind of talk about doing a 1-sentence description of your research, having nice short sentences is also really helpful and good. And that's good not just to simplify your message, but also just makes it easier for people to understand what you're saying. If you have a very long sentence that has a lot of interjections like howevers or buts, or in addition to, like, anytime you have a comma and another clause that you're adding onto the sentence and making it bigger and bigger, it makes it hard for the listener to remember what you started saying at the beginning of that sentence. So shortening it out, cutting it into smaller pieces for your audience so that they can kind of take it in a little bit at a time. Just like if you think about if you're eating a big meal, like if someone gives you a hamburger, you're not going to shove the whole thing in your mouth. That's not going to taste good. It's not going to feel good. It's not going to be fun for anybody. But if you take small bites, then you get to actually enjoy and understand what you're eating. Another thing to do to simplify, and often to shorten as well, is to avoid overly complex words. And this refers largely to like jargon that's used, specific terminology used in your field. This comes up a lot for people. People are like at least a little bit aware of how jargon can be problematic when talking to people who aren't in your field. And this is another thing that we get we're so sort of tunnel vision on our research that we forget what's common for the general public to know and what is actually a very specialized term that people have no idea what you're saying when you say it. So kind of taking a step back and looking at the words that you're using and thinking, like, is this a very complicated word? And there's a tool that I don't link to in this, but I'll put it in the chat, called the Simple Writer. I don't actually have the link, but it's from the author of the XKCD comic. So if you do a Google search for Simple Writer XKCD, you'll find it. This is a really nice tool for thinking about the words that you're using. It's a bit extreme where it's it allows you to paste some text into the field and it will highlight anything that isn't in the top 10,000 most commonly used English words. So it gets a little absurdist in how you can kind of go in and see like what words highlight when you're going in. So for me, when I go in and type in my research, one of the words that isn't in the top 10,000 most commonly used English word is the word nature. And so trying to find another way to talk about nature, I assume most people that I'm talking to will know what I mean by the word nature. But being able to think like, okay, so that's a word that maybe, is there a more simple way to say that? Or is there another way to say that that will make people, that will make this more accessible to more people? Again, a word like nature that starts to become, again, that sort of absurdist, like, how do I talk about this without using those words that are common to me and common to most people, but aren't the top 10,000 most commonly used words. So jargon is one kind of complex word group that we want to avoid to simplify our messaging. It can make things shorter to use jargon. That's one thing that jargon does do sometimes for us, is be a nice shorthand, which is what this session's all about, is being short. So there may be times when perhaps jargon is what you want, but being able to explain it quickly is also a helpful thing to be able to do. But in addition to jargon, there are other things that we use, especially in academic writing, that aren't, like, people generally understand what you're saying, but they're not words that they would use normally. They're not words that you're going to see pretty commonly. So a good example of this is the word utilize. A lot of folks, when they're talking about their research, they talk about utilizing certain methods or utilizing certain tools. And while most people understand the word utilize means to use, there's not really a good reason to not use the word use instead of utilize, because, and it's shorter than utilize, but utilize is also sort of, it gives like the signal to your audience that you are speaking sort of academic ease, that you're kind of, that it might not be something for them if you're talking about it using these sort of $10 words, as they say, rather than using more commonly used words. So look out for jargon, look out for those words that, maybe you could find a simpler way to say it, or a more common way to say it. Maybe it's a better way to talk about that. All right, so we're gonna try it. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna have you all write a 1-sentence description of your research. You can use that formula if you want, or you can try writing it however you feel like. And then I'm gonna give you a couple minutes to do that. And then I'm gonna put you all in breakout rooms. And then I want you to say your sentence to each other and then explain back to each other what the other person's research is. Does that make sense? So we're sort of not just doing something short, but also making sure we're being clear about what we're talking about. So I'll give you all a couple of minutes to write those 1-sentence explanations. So the next thing we're going to do is try to take the messages that we just wrote and make them even shorter. So find things you can cut, find things to edit, try to get it down even shorter than you just had it.
So if you want a goal for how short to get it, I was in a workshop time where they made me, they told me to explain my research in 11 words. So if you want a goal, maybe try that. We won't hold you to it. Like, we're not gonna sit there and count, but you could try that.
It's definitely challenging. I just turnabout's fair play, so I'm doing my own. And way over 11 words. As I could do you know, we could write a very short description, but it doesn't give any of the why this matters or like what I want to find. It's sort of, I'm studying this. Like,
Yeah, I think the shortest I ever got mine was like 15 words. That was like the shortest I could do. And that was all without explaining what a galaxy was or like, you know, because like not everyone knows what a galaxy is. So I was like, okay, well, I just have to not, I'll explain that later, I guess. But yeah, it's difficult.
one of the things to think about, this is something we talked about in the elevator pitch workshop as well, that again, one of the reasons to do this, not just to see what you can do and to get you to sort of think outside of your box that you focus on doing your research, but also if you're talking to somebody and you have a very short time to talk to them, you want to be able to hook them in right away. So having like a very short thing to say that, you know, maybe doesn't explain everything and leaves doors open for you to continue talking about it, at least getting that like first bit of important information out so that they start listening, especially in crowded situations, networking situations where everybody's talking and you're meeting lots of people. Having a quick hook is going to get somebody to stay and ask questions and want to know more. So I would recommend, I mean, we could keep trying to make it shorter and shorter and shorter, but I feel like you both have done such a good job of shortening things up and making things simple and easy to understand. I don't want to sort of belabor the point. So, I will stick around for questions. If you have any other questions, Joe might have some promotions from other Graduate Center events. They do so much great programming there. We also have a lot of events in the library that you might want to check out that might be useful for you as well.